Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Jeff Evenson. He's a business coach, investor, and acquisition entrepreneur. Thank you for being on the show today, man. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Cool. So I always like to start off with kind of origin story, man. I'm prior military. I see that you've actually got some training in that realm. Let's just
Sure.
kind of talk about how did you get your start into the entrepreneurialism, and then kind of how did you end up with this acquisition entrepreneur and helping other acquisition entrepreneurs?
That's great. Thanks for that. The short version of my story, I grew up in St. Louis and I stumbled into a place called West Point, United States Military Academy, and graduated from there in 1990. Spent a short time in the Army as an engineer officer, exited the Army and went to grad school and learned all about these things that I had never heard anything about because they don't teach you in the military about finance and buying businesses and that sort of thing. Then I spent about 10 years in private business, kind of on the investment side. I did some equity trading and some investment management and that sort of thing. After a long while, landed in a department within a big multinational company that was doing mergers, acquisitions across a bunch of private businesses. And I found that really fascinating because now I had this stuff that I learned about and realized that, financial statements actually get used to operate businesses, and businesses can be bought and sold and that sort of thing. So it was kind of a new thing. At the same time, my wife at the time was interested in buying a business or becoming a business owner. And she was working for, of all things, given my hairline and your hairline, a hair salon. So we actually bought a hair salon in 2008, in May of 2008. It was a pretty big operation, doing about almost $4 million in sales and had about 60 some odd employees. So it was a pretty big operation. Here I found myself in a high-end luxury business in May of 2008. And if anybody knows what happened a few months later, the world started to implode and there wasn't as much disposable income around and that sort of thing. Here I was trying to figure out how to navigate tough times in a high-end business during a recession. We bought the business in 2008. We added another location in 2011, grew throughout that whole time, which is pretty amazing. And then ultimately bought another small business that was a $500,000, $600,000 manufacturer that was part of our supply chain. And ultimately, I exited those companies, all three of those companies, in 2018 through a divorce, which, by the way, is a way to exit a business. Maybe not the one that I'd recommend to everybody, but a way. And then on the back of that, a friend of mine that I went to West Point with reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm looking to run this company. There's a guy who's trying to sell a business, and he's got a buyer from another state, but they want somebody to run it locally. Would you come and help me run it?" And I thought, yeah, it sounds great. I'm in a transition point anyway. And he said, "But I haven't heard from the buyer in about a month, so I don't know what to do here." And I said, "Tell him we'll buy it." And he kind of looked at me apoplectic and like, "Hey, I don't know how to do that. Would we be able to buy the company?" I said, "Sure. It's no problem. If the company cash flows, we can buy the company." Pivoted from the hair salon business into a precision machine shop, which, by the way, they have nothing to do with each other.
They're pretty similar, right?
Other than the fact that they have humans working there, that's about it.
Yeah.
We bought that company in May of 2019, and I helped operate that business for about 18 months. I exited the business in December of 2020. Since then, I've been coaching business owners because I feel like that I have the experience of having acquired ongoing businesses and then jumping in there and actually operating those businesses. And then on top of that, I've been helping folks who are looking to acquire companies because I've got that experience, having done it a handful of times. can help people navigate some of the potholes that I felt like I was navigating during that time. Yeah, it's been exciting, and I think I told you before we got on the call that I'm on a personal quest now to help other people build $1 billion of generational wealth in the next 25 years. I don't need to help 6,000 people do that. I just need to help six. And if I can keep helping six people every year, I think we can achieve our goal.
That's awesome. And
Yeah,
there's a plethora, just an enormous amount of those businesses that need to change hands or they're
yeah,
going
no
to go
doubt.
away, right?
Absolutely.
They have nicknames for it. It's to the point where they call it the silver tsunami, right?
Right.
It's the
Ten to
um,
the $10 trillion opportunity, right? I mean,
yeah, ten
there's
trillion
a book
dollars worth of
a book written about it, right?
yeah. It's the if you really look at I mean, it's a problem that must be solved. If you look at it, it's a large portion of this nation's GDP,
No
right?
question. I mean,
You
there's
know,
the numbers I've seen are over 50% of GDP, and over 50% of the employers are these small businesses that are held privately. And to me, that's an opportunity. I think anywhere from, depending on what you read, from 30 to 50% of those companies are owned by baby boomers
mhm,
who are in their 70s to 90s.
mhm.
And frankly, those folks are either going to sell their businesses or they're going to turn off the lights. And that's a challenge.
And it's sad. I actually have run across a few. There's one in our little hometown there where there was commercial electrical. They had 15, 20 trucks, and it was one of the bigger commercial electrical around. And all of a sudden, I get the word that, like, I would drive by it to drop my wife off to work because we carpooled a lot. We live 20 miles from the office. I mean,
Mm.
from where she worked. It just made sense. And one day I noticed there's nobody going in and out. Like, this was a hustling,
Huh.
bustling place. So I did a little research on it. The husband passed away,
Huh.
and nobody had check signing authority, so they couldn't cut payroll. They couldn't do everything, and
Holy cow.
it eventually went under, and everything had to go auction off because by the time they got court authority to sign stuff and do everything, it was those customers had to go somewhere else, right? It was
Yeah, it's
just too
totally
damaged.
crazy, right? Yeah, I talked to a commercial real estate agent once who told me that he's run into more than one situation where he's selling a building and he kind of walks in and there's people in the building and he's like, what's going to happen with these guys? And building owner is also the business owner. He's like, oh, I'm just going to shut the business down. I'm like, what? I said, well, if you ever find that situation again, call me because I'll figure out how to buy that.
Yeah,
We'll make
exactly.
something.
It's happening already, and it's gonna happen a lot more in the future. There's just even with the listed businesses brokers, what do they say? Less than 20% of all businesses that are ever
Right.
listed even get sold, and a lot of it has to do with there's a very low bar of entry to be a business broker. A state I
No
just
doubt.
moved from doesn't even have a licensing requirement whatsoever. A
Well,
lot of states don't.
yeah, I would say I think Florida might be the only one that I know of that does. Most states don't. And the situation is that there are 6,000 business brokers in the country. And I live in Missouri. There are 32,000 real estate brokers in Missouri alone. So talk about an underserved community. And I happen to I have joined up as a business advisor slash broker. I have the ability to help our office here sell businesses. And to me, we all know it. The bar is very low on entering that space. If you got a pulse and can understand the idea of buying and selling and get some contracts signed, you can sell a business. So,
It's
um,
scary.
yeah,
I'm in California and well, we have a licensing requirement. I looked into it. It's like, oh, you
okay.
have to be a real estate broker for 2 years. I mean, you have to,
Right.
like, what is it?
As if that helps you.
Exactly. I get it if there's real estate attached to the business, that makes sense that
Sure.
you have to have a real estate broker involved, but
Right.
there are clearly 2 distinctly different traits and skill sets
Right.
and clientele.
No doubt
One
at
does
all.
not equal the other.
No, it's shocking to me that it's such an underserved space. And we all know, as anybody who's done any searching knows, there's no MLS for businesses. There's no way to see what's the entire universe of businesses that are for sale, and that makes it very challenging to get good price discovery and all the things that come with that. Yeah, very challenging.
It's intriguing that there's not, right? You've got a few
Mm.
websites that are pretty dominant inside of that, but other than that,
Yeah.
there's nothing, right? You've got a lot of these small businesses, $5 million and below, end up using these SBA loans,
Mm.
and their current practices don't support what's really going on in the community. If you look at what happens in every level above an SBA loan, it's rarely 100% purchase. Rarely. I'm
Right.
getting rumors I'm trying to get the head of the SBA and the head of SCORE on the show because I'm going to
Oh,
ask them how
really?
they're planning to deal with this. So I've been reaching out to them and working with their media department to put them on here. But the question is like, how are we going to deal with this huge wave? Because their
Mm,
current practices don't work and won't scale to work. Even if they had the money to loan everybody that wanted one of these, the mathematics don't work out if you're a mathematic type person because how long they
mm,
take to close and the hoops they make people jump through, right? And the risk that the owner has to take on when it's always 100%. So I'm hearing rumors right now that in 2023 they're going to make it either 80 or 90%. You can actually do partial
really?
acquisitions.
That'd be really interesting. The challenge, of course, Ron, is that they, without question, that opportunity exists, and that would be great, and it would probably make open up the aperture for more deals. But the challenge is that someone's going to take advantage of that, and someone's going to be is going to do something nefarious with that, just like we saw with PPP, just like we saw with Idle, all the stuff that happens, and that's why they create those rules so that people aren't just lining their pockets with SBA government funds
Yeah.
or guaranteed SBA loans. And so, yeah, it's a problem that needs to be solved, but at the same time, I can empathize a little bit with the SBA that it's a trick box, right? Like they have to be worried about how do we do this without people grossly taking advantage of it. Although we know the stories that'll be told will only be the 3% of them that are people taking advantage of it, right? So it's like, yeah.
It's interesting that I actually have, I would call him a friend. I mean, somebody I went through training with and was friends with who thought he was being sly, took advantage of that PPP loan. He's in
Mm.
minimum security prison right now for 18 months.
They
I
should
didn't
be,
know what he was
man.
up to at the
Sorry.
time, but I know he should. And I'm just saying it happens. And
Yeah.
he didn't, in his own mind, he didn't think what he was doing was wrong,
Right.
but it was 100%, right?
Yeah.
And when it kind of clicked, it was wrong. He turned himself in. I mean, they long story short, he turned himself in and owned up to it and basically pled guilty and is doing his time. But it's gonna happen, and that's the reason a lot of these rules change. And in the real estate space, it was really I've come from real estate world. It became really the hot thing to do what's called wholesaling. To put a
Okay.
house under contract you had no way to close, and then to sell it to another investor. I was saying over and over again, that's just a bad business model. If you don't have the ability to close, you don't have the money, you don't have the intelligence, or you bid wrong or whatever, these what happened was new guys would get into the space, they would overbid on something just because they didn't know how to negotiate, they didn't know it was a bad
Sure.
price, and then they would lock it up in contract for 90 days and hurt the homeowner. And I was
Right.
like, "You're one senator's son or daughter. You're one step from hurting somebody powerful to having all the laws changed and to put rules and laws up that'll stop this when it is a useful utility for people who legitimately know what to do." Right?
Correct. Correct.
And it
Yeah.
happens, like, Oklahoma was where I was at the time. I'm in California now. But in
Mm.
Oklahoma, they just passed laws, you have to be a broker to do that. You actually have to have a broker's license. A broker has to be
Hmm.
involved even in wholesale deals, and a lot of states are doing that now. Same thing's gonna happen here. It will happen is they'll open up the gates, they'll change it, and then they'll make laws to make it criminally punishable if you get caught
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
doing something shady, and it's sad that people take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Um
No doubt at all. I've been a SBA lender or a borrower rather. All the deals, well, not all the deals, but many of the deals that I did involved SBA loans. I had other SBA loans for new equipment and for a new location when we built the second salon. I I understand. I feel like I understand really reasonably well the SBA process. I find it to be a great facility. You've got to find a good lender that you can build a relationship with. I always tell people when I'm talking banking with people, I always say, go find the list of SBA lenders in your market, the
Mhm.
top 10, top 100, whatever it is. Start at the top of the list and start moving down until you haven't heard of the bank. When you get to that one, that's the one you want to go talk to because
Yeah.
they're doing decent volume and they're small enough that they want to build a relationship with you individually. Because if
It's
you
a
talk
good
to the
idea.
big guys, yeah, if you talk to the big guys, they can say that they're going to build a relationship with you, and then they transfer the loan officer to another state or city or
Right,
whatever, and now all of a sudden you're just loan number 17464, and
right.
holy cow, now I'm trying to fight that one.
In my mind, the way that SBA facilitates some of the wave that's coming is threefold, and I'm gonna run this past you because I wanna know your opinion because 'cause you've been on the other
Sure.
side of it. Step 1, I think they have to shorten the cycle, right, that on how long it takes to get approved. So they
Hmm.
gotta streamline their processes, make it really known and clear, and the banks have to participate in that because the banks add their own requirements and on top of the SBA. So that needs
Hmm.
to be very clear and very understandable in less than 60 days. Right.
Hmm.
So that's step one. Step two, I think they need to either double or triple the limit. There is currently, if you look at where there's a gap, right? The private equity buys a lot of these companies and will buy a company, but they typically don't go below that 25. Some of them now are getting down to 10 million. Anything
Hmm.
below 10 million purchase price is just really small for what they got to do. Most of them won't play between below the $25 million mark. I was just talking to one a months ago, and he's like, they don't touch anything below 50 million, right?
Right. That's crazy,
So
right?
it depends on the industry. So there's a gap in some of these industries. The gap is the PE, which is the next purchase level. If you can't sell through SBA, it goes from 5 million to you have to get up to 50 million. So if you're a
Hmm.
company that should sell for 15 million, now it's all private lenders, and there's ways to get it done, but it's not it's a lot harder for them. So I think
Yeah.
if the SBA would double it or even triple it, go to $15 million max
Yeah.
purchase with some other requirements and other stuff, of course. And then the last one is what I think they're going to do is start putting some rules around where you don't have to do 100% buyout,
Yeah.
right? That
Right.
you can
Right.
buy 70% or more of a company with these requirements, meaning that and they may just say that the 30% is non-participant, meaning that the previous owner has no say in the matter, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even
That
that
would
would
make. Yeah, that would make sense.
and
I,
it would
I
still work.
I think you're totally right. I find all those interesting, and those are probably the three pieces of the puzzle. The one part, when you talk about the shortening the cycle, the application cycle, I think what I'll say is that maybe it's because I'm in my mid 50s, I'm a jaded jerk about the government, right? Like I'm
Mhm.
not convinced that they're able to do anything efficiently, but I will say that the PPP program was the right program for the right people at the right time and delivered as efficiently as I can even imagine it could have ever been delivered. And so, as a person who took PPP loans, I was just stunned that it was actually delivered the way that it was, and it was targeted at the right people and everything else. I was just, and it was overseen by the SBA. So, in my eyes, you've now had a fire drill, right? That the SBA had to learn how to do stuff fast. I'm going to try not to curse on your show.
I have the
they
adult thing turned on. You can say anything you wanna say.
but they had to learn how to do stuff fast, and so they did that very well during PPP. So I have a hope, I guess, that at some point they figured that out, and now they can put that into exercise with tightening up the cycle, the turnaround cycle for SBA loans. It's without question, even the most efficient banks are going to do them in 45 days. Most of them are going to take 60 to 90, and the bankers will tell you that and say, hey, just plan on it being 60 to 90. As far as raising limits, I think that'd be genius as well. If you go back to what's the loan failure rate in the SBA, it's about 2.5%, less than 3. And the 7A program is designed for business acquisition. In my eyes, that's a pretty damn successful program. And I'm not suggesting that we want to like make that number closer to 25% failure rate, but you can afford a little bit more failure rate, right? If you were able to up that limit, you may stumble into some failures, but I think on balance, you're going to benefit the challenge that we have out there with these companies that are coming for sale. And yeah, I agree that having access to 10 or 15 million plugs that gap because nobody's machine shop business that we bought was a $12 million acquisition. And part of that was SBA, but obviously the balance of it couldn't be, right? It'd be creative and how do we plug that piece? And PE wasn't interested at 12 million
Right.
because it's small potatoes, right? So now you've got some way to get it done privately, and that's where negotiations and seller financing and being cute about the deal is the way to get it done. And fortunately, we were able to do that. But there was no sort of conventional SBA way to get that whole deal, take that whole deal down. So that was challenging.
I would
um,
venture to say that if they increased it, even if they increased it all the way up to 25 million, which would be a 5x over now, I would think that the failure rate would potentially go down in the respect that at $25 million revenue and decent profit margin, if you met all the criteria and all the due diligence and everything, you're no longer having to buy businesses where the buyer has to be the sole operator and the
Right.
sole knowledge, right? You buy a $5 million business, often that operator better know his stuff because he can't really plug in somebody else to do his job. You buy a
Right.
$25 million business and you realize that I'm not the right CEO from this.
The
It's
systems are in
fairly
place.
affordable to hire a CEO in place, right?
Hmm.
I think the success rate would either stay the same or potentially go up, especially if the SBA says, look, if your business, like a lot of business loans, if you look at a lot of the way commercial business loans work and stuff, they're reevaluated every 3 years, right?
Sure.
They can
Sure.
call your note due if you're
Yep.
not
Yep.
performing. If the
No doubt.
SBA did something similar inside of like, look, anything over $5 million loan or anything over $10 million loan, you have to meet certain success criteria, or you have
Hmm.
the right to tell you to do something different. In that
Right.
respect, that if you're not meeting the economic standards within your industry, right? The industry average is growing 15% per year over year, 5% over year, and you're declining bad,
Hmm.
then look, we're going to say we're going to call your note due unless you replace yourself as a CEO. And I
Or
think there's some,
refinance conventionally or something like that. Yeah. Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting space. I've got a colleague that I'm partners with in my business coaching space. He's a banker and he spent 35 years in the space. He was my lender in my SBA
Hmm.
loan world. I'd love to bounce that off of him and just see what his thoughts were there because he can tell you that his bank kind of
Hmm.
thrived when they got $1 million to $1.5 million loan.
Hmm.
Those were home runs for them. And he said that the larger ones, which I took down at least one of those, were a little more troubling for him because there was a lot more due diligence and there's a lot more worry and there's who are we lending to and all the other stuff. And then the super small ones were terrible because they were the same amount of work as the $1.5 million loan, but the vig for them wasn't there. Like they would sell off the loan, they wouldn't get a big pickup on those, and it was still the same amount of work. Yeah, interesting stuff.
And the other thing I didn't think about, but it just came to my head right now, is currently the SBA insures, what is it, 70 or
75%.
75%?
Yep.
75% of the loan. It could be to say, is like, look, we'll do 75% of loans up to 5 million,
Mm,
70% at 5 to 10, and 60% between 10 and 25. It's up
yeah,
to the
right.
banks to decide whether or not they want to work with you. And that would open up to bankers like your guy, where he says, my $1 million loans are home runs, and it's a little risky for me to go a $12 million loan. If the SBA said, well, we'll insure 60% of a $12 million loan, now you just really reduce the risk profile for the banks, and they'd be more interested in looking at those avenues.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. I mean, I think it's a brilliant conversation. It does solve that challenge that we face of these companies that are going to sell or going to close
Right.
and are frankly part of whether it's the industrial complex or whatever they're part of right now. Most of them are old school manufacturing type companies that are owned by that boomer generation. And so I think that's where the challenge is that a lot of the old school manufacturing stuff either dies on the vine or has to get sold. And how do we get that? How do we put it in a position, the best position to sell those, to put new business owners in a great position to be successful?
Right. Right. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the
Yep.
acquisition process. You help buyers find businesses and stuff. What
Mm.
do you think? Let's talk about that process. I know that you've done a few yourself. What do you think is the key in the early stages of working with these business owners? Guy's got a
Yeah.
manufacturing plan. He's reaching retirement age. He doesn't want to know what he's going to do next. You have that initial first call. What is your objective in that first phase?
Yeah, it's great. Really, I think anybody who has a first call, it's funny. I got a call from somebody recently who, hey, I'm going to go see this seller, and I'm going to meet her for the first time, but I'm going to get 3 years of tax returns from her and the last 3 years financials. And I'm like, well, good luck with that. You'll never talk to her again because that's pretty aggressive. Like your first conversation, early stage conversations, is all about building rapport, right? Like you've got. I always use it. I don't know if I made up this phrase or I stole it from somebody else, but it's free to for anybody to use. People don't sell their companies to assholes. You know,
Yep.
if you come in and your guns ablazing and hey, I need to get this before I even take a look at your company, there is such an amazing part of the process is trust and rapport and just psychology of the deal, right? I think we overlook that sometimes when you find these guys who are doing maybe search funds or they're out there, hey, I learned this in grad school, I'm going to go buy a company. Like, okay, great, take a breath, because you're going to have to learn how to talk to humans and really negotiate with them and understand better. When you go into a conversation with a business owner, all you're doing is you're going in to find their story, learn more about their story, and let them wax poetic all day long about how they started this company from their garage, and now they've turned it into this, and and let them tell stories, let them do whatever they want to do, but talk about how they got into the business and their passion for the business. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to create an image where they see you as a potential them from 20 years ago. Okay, this guy or gal could be somebody who could actually take this to the next place. And so I think we sometimes get ahead of ourselves, and we just try and like execute the stuff that we're supposed to do when we buy a company, because we know the process looks like, first I do this and I drop an LOI, and then I go in and I do due diligence and blah, blah, blah. Like, great, but you're never going to get to an LOI if you don't build rapport with that seller to start with. That's the big challenge to start with.
I think that's why a lot of business brokers fail. If you reach out to a business
Totally.
broker who has a business for sale, first thing he's going to do before he wants anything, he wants a proof of funds, right? You don't know who I am. You don't know what I'm interested in. You want me to show you my financials.
Right.
And I see it.
Exactly.
And it really bugs me a little bit, because like, we're playing poker. I'm about to show you my hand. No, I'm not showing you my hand. And I get there, because I get what they're trying to do, because they get a lot of people that are kicking tires, but it doesn't work. Right. In the same way. And they set you up where you don't have that rapport. In my mind, there's 3 conversations I want to have before I see anybody's financials. First one is kind of, tell me how you started this. Tell me what you built. Tell me why you built it. I want to know the story, right? I want to be bought in on your vision of where you came from and why you built this. The next one is, I want to know, where do you see it going? What do you want to see happen with this company after you're gone? Because that's important to these guys. What do you want to see happen when you're gone? And then I also want to know, and this is just recently in the last probably 12 months or so, or 8 or 9 months, is what do you want to do next? Because a lot of times these deals fail because they get to the closing table and they don't know what they're going to do next. They get nervous. This is all they've done for years, and their identity is so wrapped around it. They don't. I've even had them honestly tell me, there's a guy I really like, run into him a few times. He was almost an investor. I say almost. He was too crude he made too stiff of an offer, but he was going to be one of the investors in my real estate firm, like loaning me money to buy houses. Anyway, when I asked him if you're ready, like, hey, let's do this. His wife wants him to sell it. His friends are telling him it's time. He's 70 something, just had a stint put in his neck to avoid a stroke. And he's like, I don't want to sell. All my friends that have sold their businesses died within a few years. I'm not ready to die.
Oh my gosh.
But that's in his mind. He's like, I sell this. This is all I do. So that's one of the, and having a couple of those conversations, you realize if they don't have a very active plan and really excited about what's next, you could lose the deal at the end, and you're not doing them any favor, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100% about the psychology of the deal. Like, if you think about it, you and I are in a room, you're the seller, I'm the buyer. You don't trust me. You're scared. You don't know what's next. You're skeptical. You think I'm trying to lowball you, all those things. So it's all this trust stuff. And I look at you and I'm like, this guy's telling me that next year is going to be the best year ever. He's telling me that there's no problems in the company. It's really well run. I know I'm going to buy it, and it's going to be a complete mess, whatever. So it's this weird like combination of two people who have no trust. Right. And so the psychology of it to build that rapport. People talk about time kills all deals, right? Like, oh, time kills all deals. You got to get the deal done in 90 days, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know what? Time kills all deals, but time also builds trust. And so there may be some times when you trade a little bit of calendar for a lot of trust. And
I think there's a balance. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Right. Like, and so when you go through the deals, it's got to be, everybody has to feel either you come to an agreement when both parties feel equally cheated out, right? Like, so like you feel equally frustrated by the final price, right? I feel like I'm paying too much. You feel like you're getting too little. Okay, we're probably in the right place.
You've been there and you've got a lot more experience than me. I kind of have this mindset where it's rapport within 21 days, meaning we've had a couple calls. I've got rapport. We're starting to trust each other. LOI within 30 to 45 days, right? I'm showing you that I am interested. We're going to move forward. Due diligence or agreement within 45, 60 days. Shortly after that, no, I've never seen anybody really look at an LI for weeks, right? If you've got the rapport there, they know already whether or not they want to work with you. And then closing that, I still think you can get the deal done in 90 days, but if it's not in 12 days. If you don't have the rapport
Right.
there, if you don't say, okay, the first 3, 4 weeks, I'm not even gonna look at his numbers, right? I might, if he offers them to me, he's like, hey, what do you need next? I was like, might say at some point I'm gonna ask for XYZ. But right now I just I gotta know I like what you built. I gotta know I like who you've employed, that I
Yep.
like the
Yep.
culture you've built, and I will continue to do what you want. And I want to know that I'm on the path that you want this to be on, because at
Right.
the end of the day, you're not going to sell this to me. You might say you
Right.
will now. You may think it's all about money, but at the end of the day, you're not closing this deal if you think I'm going to harm your brand, your legacy, or your people,
Totally,
right?
bro. That's exactly right. The legacy piece of this is so important. People forget that, especially I mean, if it's a guy or gal who bought a company 5 years ago and they're flipping it or something like that's a different game, right?
Different
But
game. Yep.
but if you're talking to a founder, you're talking to somebody who started this company in 1987 or whatever, and they have tons of blood, sweat, and tears in the business, or as Jeremy Harper would say, blood, sweat, and years. Uh,
Right.
so it's real, and what they're worried about is, hey, what's not only what's my next step as a human, but what's going to happen to this company and where's it going from here? And so there's a lot of worry on their part as to what their legacy is and how are their employees being taken care of and what are you going to do with this? I don't want to drive by here and see that it's been torn down or that you change this or change that or rebranded or whatever. And so there's a lot of that piece, and I just think that the psychology, all the mechanics of a deal, those are taught by name a person. They're all over the place. You can learn them on the internet. You can learn them in B school. You can learn them whatever. The mechanics are pretty simple, but the psychology is a completely different game, and it requires some finesse. And I'm not saying be duplicitous. I'm not saying be disingenuous. I'm saying you have to come at it from the right place in your heart and really care about how this gets presented and what that legacy looks like. And I've used the term dozens of times. Hey, I really just want to honor the legacy that you've built, and that's going to be part of our brand going forward. And it may not be the same way you expect it to go, and that may not be your exact plan that you have, but it's going to honor what you've built and have your name associated with it, and it's going to be part of our story. So and so built this company. I was privileged enough to pick it up in this year, and going forward, it looked like this.
Yeah, I get that. And at some point, do you ever bring up, and I don't know where to put this in. At some point, I kind of need to know for their own sanity, what are you going to do when you get this fat check, right?
Yeah,
And I
right.
don't ever word it
Totally.
that way, right? Because a lot of times people don't realize, like, look, you're about to receive probably the largest sum of cash you've ever received in your life, and in one fell swoop, and or in payments or however the deal is structured. Who do you have on your team that's going to help you
Mm-hmm.
switch from business owner to somebody who can maintain, grow, and manage wealth,
It's a fund
right?
manager. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a
Yeah. I mean, that's a terrific question. And I think the other part of that, and there's a little wrinkle to that I'll add, is that not only do you want to make sure that you understand how they're going to navigate that, but I always tell people like the minute that you can get them to tell you what the plan is with that money, boom, they've mentally spent it.
oh
They're
yeah.
like, so emotionally, they've gotten to that place. There's a lot about visualization. There's a lot of brain science there
Mhm.
that gets them to the emotional place that they've actually gotten that check and they've done something with it. Like, well, I'm going to buy a house on the coast and I'm going to do X. Okay, great. Like, there's going to be more than enough there. But now I know as a buyer, okay, well, he's going to buy a house in Naples. That's going to be $1 million. So he needs at least $1 million up front. Okay, I
Right.
know what that like. So you kind of that helps you size it a little bit for yourself, and that's part of the process. But it also has put him in a place where he knows, yeah, I saw that house when I was down there last time. That's the one or whatever. And so emotionally, they've gotten themselves there as to what that transition looks like. It helps both sides of the deal, right? I think it's pretty important.
It's funny is you say $1 million in Naples, and I'm looking around. I live in Northern California in a very resort type of area, and I'm looking for land and houses, and I haven't seen anything I'm really interested that's less than 2.5. It's
Yeah,
crazy
yeah,
here.
I'm probably off now. Whatever, a million might not get you anywhere. I live in St. Louis. We don't have $1 million houses. Are like, whew, they're like unicorns.
It's funny is that exactly I moved here from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and, like,
Right?
selling some of the real estate we own there, and I'm gonna have to sell 5 or 6 of them for a decent down payment over here.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Pull money from places and stuff I don't wanna pull, so, and
Right.
yeah, it's every market's different. It's beautiful here, I love it, but, understanding what that guy's goals and objectives are, right, and what their concerns are, right? He's like, because you'll hear him, it's like, what ha the I asked one guy, I said, like, "Look, we pulled an SBA loan on this is a $3.5 million purchase. You're gonna have some fees, so you're gonna get a $3 million check.
Mhm.
What are you gonna do? How is that gonna impact you?" He goes, "I don't know. The taxes are gonna be like half of it, right?" I said, "Have you talked to a tax consultant? Like,
Totally
hey, I'm
right.
selling my business for 3.5 million. I'm sure there's some fees and stuff, but I'm gonna get 3.1 or 3.2 million in
Right.
a check, in a wire transfer to my account to my
Yeah.
account.
Right. Right.
What is the IRS gonna think about that?"
Right.
And what can we do? A lot of times there's just showing that you care about that side of things. And a lot of times I think I haven't got all the way through that process of the bigger ones, but I think even reaching out and like if they don't know somebody, kind of starting to do some of that research for them. Hey, there's 4 or 5
Sure.
people here that I think that would. I Googled it. I'm really good on the computer, man. Here's 5 people in your market that would probably be qualified
Right.
to give you that
Right.
type of advice.
Totally,
I
man.
don't know any of
Totally.
them from Adam, but here's 5 people to call and to see who
Get the
you
ball
connect with.
started. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt. I mean, as a matter of fact, I just saw something yesterday on an interesting deal structure on the seller side, where the seller, instead of receiving the check, an insurance company receives the check and then creates an annuity, and it basically buys an annuity, and that annuity gets paid out over X number of years. And now they don't have to manage the money; they have a guaranteed annuity payment every year, and it also stretches out their tax liability and probably reduces it depending on what their marginal tax rate is and capital gains and all the other stuff. But I thought it was a really fascinating study on how to mitigate some of that tax liability in doing a deal on the seller side. And so yeah, any of those tax strategies, again, most of these people are ladies and gentlemen who have created companies and know how to make stuff and know how to sell stuff. They don't know how to manage funds. They don't know how to reduce their tax liability. They don't know how to sell a company. That's not the business they're in. They're in the widget selling business, or they're in the professional services business, or whatever they're in. They're not in the business selling business.
A lot of times business owners, the other thing they don't get is like they've been paying themselves a salary of like especially the smaller ones, sellers discretionary earnings, right, of a small company. They've been paying themselves, I just make the math easy, $100,000 of sellers discretionary earnings plus some perks, cars and stuff like that. So let's just call it
Yeah.
150, right? They might be getting 4x.
Yeah.
What they don't realize is they've got 4x there, so they've got money to make it for 4 years. 4x might sound pretty impressive as a lump sum
Right.
check, but
Right.
after the tax man takes his piece, if you're used to living on and actually have a spending requirement, you have a lifestyle that requires that $150,000 worth of income, what are you
Mm-hmm.
gonna do 2.5 years from now when you've used up all the money?
Ron, that's a great point. One of the things that I always coach people to do is when sometimes you get into that place where you're negotiating, you get to a price, and you get to how's that price going to be paid out? It's going to be one lump sum. SBA loan can only be X amount and whatever. And for instance, we had a big portion of seller debt in the machine shop deal, and the way we structured it was, hey, we're gonna do a 10-year note, and it's going to be paid out on a monthly basis. But I ended up laying out the cash flows, the monthly cash flows, just to show them like an amortization chart of, hey, this is what it's going to look like in your pocket. We're going to stroke a check on the first day of every month that's going to look like this for the next
Mhm.
120 months. And to me, that helps people get their brain around, like, oh, I can live on some fantastic amount of money a month, 50 grand a month or whatever the thing is.
Right?
And they look at what they're making now. They look at, okay, well, how does that compare? Okay, yeah, I can do that. And I can peel off part of that and put it in savings, or I can put it, I want to get a bullet payment at the beginning, and then the rest of it's going to be over the course of time. So I think there's value to creating that series of cash flows to really put it into hard terms. Hey, seller, this is what it's going to look like for you. You're going to get a check from me every month for the foreseeable future that's going to look like this big. And they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. So that helps.
We've got a we only have a few minutes left here. Let's jump right
Yeah,
into it. I love this little phrase you put here, the dog catches the car, right? I get the
yeah,
visual.
right.
I lived out in the country and we used to have these way out in the country when we were in Oklahoma. I'm still kind of out in the country. I joke around and it's like it's a 15-mile drive, 17-mile drive around here to get a Taco Bell. Like, I
Oh
mean,
my
I live remote. I live in the redwood forest of Northern California. There's redwoods
gosh.
in our front yard. Beautiful. But if you think I used to think about, like, the drive back to our house, there was these 4 dogs, and every single day, they would wait by the side of the road, right?
Yeah.
And then they would chase you. It's like one of these days and every once in a while, you'd see it'd be 2 dogs, and then another they'd have a younger dog that somehow they would replace a dog, but so I was
Right.
like and my son asked one day, I said, "Why is there only 2 dogs now?" I said, "One of them caught a car."
One of them caught. Yeah, one of them
Yeah.
won the race. Yeah.
One of them.
So
One
yeah, I use that term because I think sometimes people get so caught up in the chase and so caught up in the deal that it's okay. Now what? The dog catches car. Like, now what do I do? So there's certainly the LOI to closing time frame, right? There's stuff that has to get done, and there's boxes to check, and all the things that you have to do in that process. Get your financing and get your due diligence and all the things that you want to do, and get the purchase agreement signed and all that stuff. But then there's a day when you take transition. When you're now transitioning, now you're the business owner. Now what? Okay. I kind of, having done it a few times and being exposed to a lot of business owners, I personally do one-on-one business coaching with people and helping them create an operating system for their business, right? So I find it super important you need to have kind of 3 pieces to that business operating system. You need to have a strategic plan of some sort. You can use EOS, you can use Fern Harnish, there's tons of different places you can get strategic plans from. Have to have some sort of strategic plan that tells me what's the roadmap, where am I going. You
right.
need to create some kind of battle rhythm, right? You have to have, if you think back to your military years, some sort of battle rhythm where you have regular check-ins, regular meetings on a weekly basis, go through, and you have very structured meeting process. And it's not like when we bought the salons, I had to laugh because we asked about meeting rhythm in that business, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we have a weekly meeting. It probably only happens once or twice a month, but yeah, we have a weekly meeting." I'm like, that's not really a weekly meeting. So the second piece of it is a regular battle rhythm, meeting rhythm that you can put in place. And then the third thing is scoreboards. Because guess what? Your team needs to know what winning looks like, right? If you drop me into the middle of a cricket match, I probably won't know what's going on. But if I saw a scoreboard, I could probably figure it out. And
Right.
so I would argue that most of your employees don't know what's going on, but they have some semblance of a scoreboard somewhere. Whether it's in the machine shop business, when we bought it, they had clipboards up on the wall of all the orders. Every order was on a different clipboard. So they could see, oh, there's 3 rows of clipboards. That means we have a lot of work to do. That's a good thing. That was their scoreboard. In my eyes, if you could change that scoreboard a little bit by making the really big orders on a big butcher block piece of paper and the really one piece orders and on a post-it note, right? Now I have, not only do I know that there's a bunch of orders, but I also know the size and scale of each of them. So some way, the 3 pieces, a plan of some sort, a battle rhythm of some sort, and some sort of scoreboards that help people understand what winning looks like. Those are the things that I think are really important in running that business, and that helps you keep your finger on the pulse. I'll also say that on the first 60 days of owning a business, my hands get tired because I sit on them the entire time. I just try and watch, learn, listen. What you want to do in the first 60 to 90 days is make sure the plumbing works, right? That the money coming into your company is hitting the right bank accounts, that your employees are getting paid, that your invoices are going out to the right customers with the right names on them, that the stuff that you ordered is showing up, and the stuff that you make is going out the door. Whatever your business is, that just the plumbing works in the first 60 to 90 days. After that, it becomes a challenge to, now I've got to create some sort of way to stabilize the company. Now I need to create a sustainable company for the next 10, 15, 25 years, whatever that time frame is. And in that piece is more of okay, what are the big things we need to do to make sure that we're going to be around here for 10 years, 20 years? And that you can learn those things during the stabilization period, but you don't want to execute on any of those until after 90 days and you've watched how things have gone.
I'm actually looking around in the EOS system. I'm a visionary,
Yeah,
very high, and I'm looking for a
yeah.
really good integrator. I joke around. I tell people I'm unicorn hunting. I'm looking for a very unique individual. I want him to be an EOS integrator, or at least score high
Yeah,
on the integration side, as my operator. And I want him to be a reader because there's a lot of stuff I wanted to make sure there's a book out there. I'd like to see what happens, and it's kind of an experimental thing. And when we combine, if you know who Jack Stack is with the
Of course.
Great Game of Business, right, where
I've
everything's
I've
open.
actually done some coaching for Jack. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
Jack.
Uh,
Yeah,
That's
Jack's a Springfield, Missouri guy. So right
oh,
there.
cool. I'd love to have
Yeah.
him on the show someday.
Oh,
Um,
he's wonderful.
Yeah, but my goal would be to have an integrator, somebody like that can follow EOS's system, right, and then play with
Mhm.
that. I'm gonna reread and re-listen to Jack's
Great Game of
re-listen.
Business. The book is
Great
The
Game of
Great Game of
Business.
Business. It is a
Yeah,
wonderful book. It's just a really intriguing story about how to make sure that the critical number in your company is shared with everybody. And it goes back to that conversation about that meeting rhythm,
mhm.
that scoreboarding, all those things to make sure that everybody is on the same page. And yeah, Jack does it like no other. If you want to find a great human being who wants to ties wealth for the world, Jack Stack is your man. He's a terrific guy.
I think it's something that EOS is missing a little bit. If you had a
Mm-hmm.
hybrid model, you wanted to create, like, you're a coach, man, if you wanted to create your
Mm-hmm.
own EOS qualified business, I would say hybrid the EOS, the systematic and everything, and put
Yep.
the Great Game of Business open to Senate, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
I I really like that model. It's funny is I'm just now remodeling our whole media company, the podcast and everything,
All right.
and the including the VAs over in the Philippines and everybody that works for me. There's actually, as this thing starts to generate revenue, there's a 20% profit share that goes back and
Oh,
it gets
excellent.
dividend back. So everybody's incentivized to make this grow, to make it successful, to bring up ideas. They've all got skin in the game, and the accounting's open on it. Basically, my
Yeah.
VA, it's read only, but my VAs can see the numbers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. My argument is always that your employees are always going to act in their own self interest.
Make this part, that's what I did, make this part of their self-interest.
Right, unless or until you make the company's interest their self-interest,
Yep,
they're going to do their own thing. I mean, it's not to say that they're going to do anything bad or untoward. What they're going to do is they're going to do what's good for them.
yep.
And if you can build a system that allows them to both work in the company's best interest and their own at the same time, holy cow! Now you're sharing numbers. It builds trust. It's all that stuff we talked about even with the seller conversation, but it also permeates you as a leader. And as a leader, you're building rapport with your team, you're building trust with your team, and those are some of the best ways to do it.
I think that there's a huge opportunity out there to do. I don't I even I'm just now getting to the point where when employee stock option programs are selling the company back, the exits of selling the company back to the employees.
Mm,
I've got a guy coming on here that's a CEO of a company that specializes in that here in the next few
yeah,
weeks and lined up the interview. My
sure,
question to him is going to be, can I sell 75% back to the
sure,
employees and maintain?
yeah,
So if you could, that's my long-term goal for building generational wealth is to buy companies, get them running well, use EOS and the Great Game of Business, his model, open books and stuff. Do an ESOP, basically sell it,
yep,
75% of it back to employees, and then take a dividend on the ownership.
right.
And
I mean, and
and
then ultimately you have an exit plan too, where you get to a place where you want to walk away. The
mhm,
ESOP buys your section and or the remainder, and have a
yep,
nice day. I mean,
offer it to employees and let them buy the last 25% out, and you're
yeah,
done.
yep,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah. I mean,
that's my
that's exactly right. And if you ever get a chance, you and I need to meet up at the Great Game of Business, their gathering, their conference every year. They do it in September. You'll get blown away. I can introduce you to the right people at those things. I mean, holy cow, these guys are champions.
that made me interested. I promised the wife I wouldn't travel a little bit. I told you I did a 2-year program. We
Yeah.
traveled constantly during that. I did a 2-year leadership program, and every single quarter we flew to a different destination in the United
Oh wow.
States. So we were gone for 4 or 5 days at the end of every quarter, and we would meet in a room and talk about the projects we were building and the teams we had in play. And then I was constantly traveling for like short projects too. For the first year, it was like I was in Dallas all the time, and it came to the point where we bought this tiny home we were living in. And my wife's like, "Look, you're gone all the time. You didn't want to do that to your kids. I don't want to do that to kids. I'd rather have a different job anyway. Do you mind if we
Right.
buy one of those tiny houses you see on TV and just move down to Dallas to where when you come home in the evenings, you can come home here
You're
and
home.
you're
Right.
not
Right.
exhausted." So we grabbed one of these, and I mean, the funny thing is that was 3 or 4 years ago, and we're still living in it because we actually like this life. We
That's great.
yeah, yeah, everybody says, "How do you live in a tiny home?" I was like, "We kind of don't. We eat here, we sleep here. I run my podcast from it. You can see the stairs in the background."
There
But
you
most of the time we're out. My kids will get off school in about an hour here, and if they want to go to the beach or the coast, we'll grab up and go. Or if they
go.
wanted
Yeah.
to,
Sure.
you know,
Right.
we'll go outside and do stuff. We'll take them to the park. There's a skate park nearby. We'll grab the scooters and the skates and all that stuff, and we'll just go
Sure.
do things. So we're
Yeah.
never really here other than to sleep and eat. Next year, I'll probably be in that travel mode.
All right. Yeah,
Hell,
at some point we'll get you out there, and I'll tell you too. If you ever want to interview Steve Baker, he's kind of their mouthpiece
okay.
for great game. He would be a great interview for you. Yeah,
So, long as we can stay on the topic of buying, selling, and growing businesses, I'd love to, absolutely love
yeah,
to. And
yeah,
I'm a big
yeah,
fan of his book. I'll re-listen to it before because it's been a while since I listened to it, but I'll
yeah,
re-listen to it right before the show. But yeah,
yeah.
if you
It's
want to
great.
do that'd be great. Let's make sure everybody knows how to reach out to you. So
Sure.
if you guys, what's the best way if somebody wants to work with you, has some questions of you, just wants to get to know you and make sure you're the right fit for what they need? How do
Yeah.
people reach out to you?
Well, thanks for that. Like I said, I do business coaching one-on-one with folks. I do work with a group that does cohort coaching of groups together. A
Hmm.
company called the Lions Pride. It's thelionspride.com. I'm a coach for them. Some of those folks, like I said, work with me one-on-one. Some of them work in cohort. I'm also open to consulting on the acquisition side. Easiest way to get a hold of me is my email is just a Gmail address, which is Jeffrey, Jeffrey, .n as in November, .evenson @gmail.com. And my cell, you can put that in the email or whatever, is 314-221-0305. Happy to meet up with people, learn more about what their journey is, and see if there's a way to work together. Like I said, my quest is to help other people build generational wealth. 90% of the ultra wealthy in the United States, the people who have $5 million or more of personal wealth, are business owners. That opportunity exists for virtually everybody. I don't have the $1 billion idea of Facebook or Twitter or any of those things. So it makes more sense to me to go buy something that already works and turn around and grow it and then sell it at some point. Whether I run it for the rest of my life or I just choose to sell it after a few years, that's those transactions, those capital transactions, is when you start to build wealth for you and your family. Love to talk to your folks. I really honored to be part of your podcast, Ron. I've watched it a number of times. I've seen some of my heroes on the podcast, and I'm a little humbled, and probably there's a little imposter syndrome going on right now about why I belong on this call with you. But I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, I've had a great time talking with you, and I don't think there's any imposter syndrome there. You've been there, you've done it, you walk the walk, you talk the talk, and I do a little bit of vetting before I put people on here. So I've certainly told a handful or more people like, nah.
Yeah,
so,
sure. Yeah, well, I
yeah.
appreciate that.
So
Good deal.
just know that if you're on here, it's because you belong on here. If I thought you didn't belong on here, I would make sure you didn't. So let's call that a show and hang out for a
Thanks for
few
that.
seconds afterwards.
All right, sounds great.
Awesome. Hey, it's your host, Ronald Skelton. I want to thank you personally for watching the show today and invite you to call our new hotline, 918-641-4150. That's 918-641-4150. Call us and tell us about our show, ask questions, suggest a guest, or even tell me about a business you have for sale, and we'll reach back out to you. Again, that number is 918-641-4150. Call our hotline, leave us some information. Thank you. I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between $5 million and $30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.